Good afternoon. Welcome to the 9th day of budget hearings. I'm Councilman Kevin Kramer. I'm joined by my Vice Chair, Marcus Winkler. Other committee members present in chambers include Councilman Hudson, Councilman Joseph, and Councilman Lininger. I'm sure others will be joining directly. Councilwoman Mulvey Woolridge has an excused absence. It is 3:02 p.m. Madam Clerk, if you'd please read into the record the comment about meeting virtually.
This meeting is being held pursuant to KRS 61.826 and Council Rule 5A, read in full.
Thank you. As has been the case, departments will not be making opening comments, and we will begin immediately with council member questions. I wanted to remind you before we start discussing Metro Technology Services that they have a proposed $34.15 million operating and a $6.19 capital budget. And welcome Executive Director Chris Sight. Metro Technology Services budget includes the transfer of 3 employees from the Revenue Commission. What are the personnel and operating costs associated with the transfer of the 3 positions to Metro Technology Services? By transferring these employees to Metro Technology Services, is Metro now carrying more of the cost than it did when all 3 employees' expenses were shared with the taxing authorities in Jefferson County? Do you mean to ask that a different way? Was that clear enough?
I think that's clear. So Chris Sight, Executive Director, Metro Technology Services. For Revenue Commission employees that will be transferring to Metro Technology, this is actually reverting back to a model that we had prior to 2017. Metro Technology, prior to that date, was providing the similar services to Revenue Commission. There was a decision made at that point to pull them in-house, but they've found that having that small of a team inside has caused them issues when somebody departs from the organization in terms of institutional knowledge, having any bench depth to deal with issues as they come up. So our intention is for this to primarily be for their systems and desktop type support roles, and then the tax system administration itself will continue to remain inside of the Revenue Commission. And that also, we do have one role coming over that will deal with the compliance piece, but that's something that Metro's cybersecurity team already deals with for both criminal justice and health data. So it's just another kind of discipline that we're pretty accustomed to having to do annual reports and audits periodically on the technology.
So I think the real question is, though, when you look at the other entities involved with the Metro Revenue Commission, having these 3 employees working for the Revenue Commission meant that they were paid for out of those collective different organizations. When we take them back in as members of your staff within Metro Technology Services, are we going to be reimbursed in some way from those other entities? Will there be some cost sharing? You know, will there be okay, we'll take on the employees, you take on some other expense? How's this going to balance out, or are we just absorbing the expense?
Hi, Angela Dunn, Chief Financial Officer with the Office of Management and Budget. The collection fees the agreements remain intact with the other entities that we collect those fees from. So those fees are used to support the operation of the Revenue Commission. It's an accounting function, but essentially those fees, they are also sort of rolled into the general fund. So even though those employees are being transferred to MTS and that budget is being transferred with those employees from the Revenue Commission, that budget is still supported in the general fund by those fees that are collected. So a portion of those fees will continue to support those employees even though they are at MTS.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Winkler.
Thank you, Director. Thanks for being here. A couple of questions for you. I know one of the things that the mayor focused on in his budget address was the investment in AI. Can you talk a little bit about what those plans are and how we expect to see them pay off, either in the form of cost savings or improved service to constituents?
Absolutely. We're really excited about the possibilities that AI represents for Louisville Metro government. These investments, we think, will have some ROI, but also a lot of service improvement that we would see across the organization. I believe Director Price from Codes and Regulations talked about one of those initiatives that we're planning to fund from this, which is a program to detect blight using AI camera vision installed in vehicles that will be driving throughout the city. That will help them immensely from just detecting issues and being able to be more responsive to that. In a similar vein, we're expecting to see those types of improvements for organizations like Public Works doing things like pothole detection with the police department and enabling analytics on the cameras that they have out today for Metro Watch. you all are familiar with the flock camera system. We're hoping to add similar capabilities to the pole cameras that have been installed by Metro over the last 18 or so years, so that they can also do certain types of detection, crowds gathering, smoke in the area if people are doing tire burnouts. Lots of improvements there. And then from an efficiency standpoint, also looking at our open records department and figuring out ways to better apply redactions in an automated fashion, both to video and to documents that might be subject to that. I believe Marianne told me there were 16,000 requests for open records last year. That can be anything from one single email to 100-page document that needs redaction, or a 5-hour video. So we really expect to see that kind of come to fruition. There are other gains that we think can be had, giving people the Copilot and ChatGPT type functionality to make them more efficient at their job. Full admission, I used ChatGPT extensively to prepare for possible questions today. It took all of the meeting transcripts that you guys have had for your budget hearings this year and was able to condense down for me kind of the questions that they thought you guys might focus on for this hearing. And it did it in about 30 seconds. So whereas watching 14 hours of budget hearings to prepare for this might have been one method, this was another way to approach it.
Could we get a report card after the meeting on how many of the questions we asked that
Absolutely.
that are predicted? So,
How's it doing so?
exactly. So the follow-up question to that is so that we have a realistic expectation of when we should see sort of the benefits of these investments. Like, can you talk a little bit about what's the rollout schedule, and like, is it you're going to get the money July 1st and August 1st, open records requests are going to flow like magic, or what kind of set the expectation?
So we've been working to develop an RFP in conjunction with purchasing currently that will put out a multi-solution AI type RFP looking for solutions to the problems that we've defined as a city government and aligning it with our policies that we've developed. In addition, we've got our AI summer scholars here with us today from the University of North Carolina, Moorhead Kane program. And they are working to meet with the agencies to better do the business analysis and to determine what those best use cases are going to be for us. So my intention, if this project is funded, is to move forward quickly in July. We obviously won't be ready on July 1st because we need to release that RFP and make awards. I would expect probably sometime mid to late August, we would probably have some awards ready to go, and then that ramp up time to roll out those solutions. Now, there are some faster ones that I think July 1st we could immediately release. Doing employee training for use of Copilot, ChatGPT type technologies, we could do immediately. Adding those licenses and capabilities, we could have rolled out within the first couple of weeks. So there are some more immediate gains. Those larger projects, the rollouts of cameras and installations in vehicles, and adding those analytics and then teaching those models how to detect those specific things we're looking for, will take some time. I would expect probably by the March timeframe of 2026 that we would see some tangible results from the rollout of all those technologies.
Perfect. I want to shift gears. I've got just sort of one or two questions related to Workday and sort of other software licenses. What's our total annual spend on Workday?
So that is actually embedded in OMB's budget.
I'd have to get that breakdown for you. I don't-
Really, the question is a lead into the other question, which is thinking about our enterprise software expenses across the enterprise, right? From Workday to the software we buy with LMPD and any other department. Have you done an analysis of sort of where we stand against peer cities, and are we overinvested, underinvested, sort of just right?
Sure. So from a peer city standpoint, we do benchmark against other municipalities, and given that all of us have usually an open data portal, it makes it fairly easy to see. I will say that we are generally aligned in terms of software investment. That said, I think some cities intentionally will invest a higher amount in their Microsoft products. They have different tiers of licensing. We don't choose to invest that level here within our organization. That could have some financial impact if we were to decide at some point in the future to go down that path, but our team feels that we've made good alternative investments in other solutions for both endpoint protection and other things that would be bundled in a Microsoft-type investment if we went with their higher tier licensing. And that largely is driven based off of our support experiences with specific vendors and getting a better support model for the software that we're acquiring.
Thank you. I want to make sure that the record reflects that we've been joined in chambers by Councilmembers Rui and Chapel, and we've been joined online by Councilwoman Parker. Councilman Leninger.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm definitely interested in seeing that report from ChatGPT personally. So I have a couple of questions about the AI proposals. The first, there's a big difference between AI image analysis, trained models, and LLM, and the biggest difference is reliability. We know that AI image training results in better detection than people for a lot of medical imaging, for example. But LLM results in a lot of hallucination. What kind of human staffing are we going to be putting forward for supervision of the AI? How much money are we investing in human staffing for that?
Sure, that's a great question. We are planning to fund 4 positions initially to deal with the rollout of AI, specifically to assist our team with kind of the supervision of these tools as we deploy them, and also meeting with the agencies. Our policy that we have today currently calls for agencies to develop their own use case policy for when they want to roll out an AI solution that will define how they're going to monitor the accuracy and outputs of those, because there is still a possibility that some of these language models can hallucinate. They can put out false information, and we don't want to necessarily introduce that as an immediate response to the public on day one, something that could be inaccurate. And I think, going back to a use case that first came out a couple of years ago, there was a car dealership that I think had a chatbot on its website and essentially agreed to sell a car for $1. We don't want the city to get into that type of a situation, so we're going to have tools that monitor that. We've already made investments in our security tools this year that allow us to monitor those inputs and outputs from the language model and look for specific things that might be either inaccurate or contain sensitive information that we don't want released.
My second question is more specifically on the open records redactions and review from AI. Who will ultimately be responsible for mistakes made by the AI in terms of open records requests?
So our push with AI is still human in the loop. So that's going to be foundational to any agency rolling this out. And open records is no exception. So if we're going to have an output from that, there's still going to need to be a human review of those redactions to determine whether or not they are appropriate or accurate. So there will be human responsibility for the outputs on that within the agency that is using the tool.
Okay. And then, my final question is, do we anticipate future investment in oversight? Because one of the problems that we see with LLMs is, in addition to, concerns about hallucination and trying to train it away from the hallucination, we also have, just sort of a general garbage creep, like in chat prediction, where I don't know about the rest of you, but my chat prediction and autocorrect is worse than it was 2 years ago. And it is currently correcting words that are real and replacing them with words that are real, but not the word I wanted. So what kind of future investment are we going to have to work on that?
So part of this will be, we're going to have to make the investment and learn about the technologies at scale. We've been able to do small-scale pilots this year with ChatGPT and Copilot deployed across a very small couple of dozen users across Metro that agreed to work with us and help us to learn about the technology. I would expect as we roll this out in future phases that we will see, additional needs for investment in these platforms. The proposal that we put together here would not give ChatGPT or Copilot to any large subset of users. I think you're talking a few hundred users across Metro government initially in the first year. As that scales up, obviously, we would need to scale up to both supervise and help with the configurations of those products.
Okay, and one more question, Chair, I apologize. Do we plan to use AI evaluation with things that are, public-facing, whether it's applications, requests to 311, Public Works? Are we going to use AI for those?
We will definitely do some pilots with 311 to determine if it's feasible. I don't know that we would necessarily roll out a full production tool for them this year, given that it's still a fairly new technology. But we may do some testing. There may be a press option within 311 when they call that, it directs them to get answers to some questions that we've defined for it. I don't anticipate that having that available as a full-blown platform this year would necessarily be on the roadmap.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Joined online by Councilwoman Hawkins, Councilwoman Parrish Wright, and Councilman Owen. Councilwoman Marie.
Thank you very much. I'm looking on the printout here, and it's showing password-free login. And then I know there's conversation in their budget about buying new laptops. We know everybody has a laptop. So first of all, how's this password-free login going to work?
Sure. So the goal here is to reduce the amount of times that users are needing to change their password. Past practice has been that we've done that on a rotational basis every few months. What we've gotten is new guidance from NIST and others that indicates that that may not be the safest way to go forward in the future. It's still something that can be stolen. And so passwordless would essentially give us the option to go either app-driven on a phone, where you can authenticate via a second factor that's in your possession. So if you have an app here, or potentially using a token, a physical token that would plug into the USB port of the device, and then you would basically touch that with your finger to allow for the login. So that would eliminate the need for the user to type their password into the computer in order to gain access.
Okay, so that would not require a new computer then?
No need for a new computer.
Okay, so what's the timeline right now for replacing laptops then? Because we know that they age out long before we think they do, or until they start glitching on us.
Yeah, so our goal right now is a 4-year replacement cycle. The reason that you've probably seen an increase in our request for funding this year is that we deployed 2,400 laptops in the COVID period, right after COVID hit, and we had to get people to a telework state. We normally replace about 1,000 devices a year with the budget that we've been previously allocated, and we need to catch up. So we've fallen a little bit behind, and we need to get those caught back up so that they can then be on a normal rotation. What we're anticipating is that they'll see a larger spike up this year, and then it will reduce, not back to the last year funding, but a smaller amount moving forward for the following years so that we can just keep them on that 4-year cycle.
Thank you very much.
Just as an immediate follow-up to that, when a laptop cycles out of use, what are we doing with those? I'm guessing, anyway, if we are selling them, which is what I would expect, how much revenue do we expect from that? And that begs the question that we're selling them or not, but.
Sure. We have two ways to deal with these. One is we can transfer them to another governmental entity, and we have done that in some cases with Louisville Metro Housing Authority and some other entities. The other thing is that we do have a cyber recycling program that pays us for the devices. I think year to date, we're at about $44,000 collected off of that from the recycled devices that we turned in this year.
And can you get us a hard number on what that looks like so far and what your anticipated
Absolutely.
would be for the rest of the year? Thanks. Councilman Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to revisit the AI topic for just a bit and ask, from an operational standpoint, is the strategy for AI within Louisville Metro government more of a push or a pull? And what I mean by that is, let's say codes and regs, is the AI services and product from technology, from information technology, going to be pushed to codes and regs, or is it going to be, here's what's available, and if they want it, they can pull it? Does that make sense?
Sure. I think it varies by agency. I believe in codes and regulations instance, they found the product that they would like to roll out for this. We're willing to partner with them and kind of guide them through that acquisition process and the rollout of that technology to ensure that it's doing what we expect it to. I think that, Open Records is certainly looking for ways to gain efficiencies. They don't necessarily have a specific solution in mind, so we're kind of working with them to kind of gather what is most painful for them and figure that out. We don't want to push technology on people that don't want to use it or aren't comfortable with it yet. So that's one of the reasons we have our summer scholars here to meet with the agencies, kind of determine that maturity level of the organization to see if they're ready for AI, to see if there's training that's needed for their workforce before we deploy that. But we want to partner with agencies and help them find those efficiencies where they can.
Okay. And since this is a budget hearing, the premise of my questioning was, if it is going to be more of a pull strategy, is the expectation is that those departments that are pulling the need for AI expected to pay for it out of their budgets, or is that going to be provided for through IT's budget?
As it's proposed right now, we're proposing to fund that through IT's budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Rui.
Thank you. Another question regarding AI. I know you've tested a bunch of different AI programs out there. What differences have you found between them? Do you find one that you prefer for any given thing? What's your evaluations finding?
Sure. So we've had Copilot in the environment since last fall, and small scale, again, a couple dozen users. ChatGPT Enterprise, we started testing with in December, so a little bit later start for that. I'll tell you that I think it depends on the use case for the user and what they're trying to achieve. Copilot is built into the Microsoft environment, so it natively has some capabilities that users will find very useful in terms of summarizing emails in their inbox, helping them to kind of plan their day, working within a PowerPoint to help you develop content within that PowerPoint or maybe reformat it to a different type. That said, ChatGPT, from our testing initially, has performed better in terms of doing analysis and providing recommendations and understanding the data that you're putting into it at a little bit better depth than what we've seen out of the Copilot solution. In fact, we've seen some users that started on Copilot that have requested to switch over to ChatGPT just because they saw the same thing that we were seeing within our own testing.
Okay, I believe you also mentioned there was an Amazon one. Are there any other ones out there that you have not tried?
We haven't done anything at enterprise level yet with Google's Gemini or Notebook LLM. We have had some people, I think, test around with it just on their personal accounts. That one's fairly interesting. Amazon Bedrock is one that we're looking at to deploy potential chatbots and things like that, both internal to users as well as external. The nice thing about that is you can kind of limit the data that it's using to the data that you provide to it. So it's not going to necessarily hallucinate and come up with something that it learned from the language model, where it's a little broader within ChatGPT. So we'll have a little bit more institutional control over those types of models versus the Copilot ChatGPT type tools.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one real quick one, then Councilman Winkler. Is the $3.75 million sufficient to complete the entire data center power and HVAC redesigned project? What's the anticipated project's completion date?
So this was driven off of an outage that happened on January 1st of this year. We had originally forecasted the data center equipment on a 20-year life cycle when the facility was opened. We suffered a catastrophic failure of one of the air conditioning units within the facility. It caused a significant power outage in the building, caused us to have to fail the 911 center out to the backup site. We didn't at any time lose any systems or availability of systems because we had redundancies built into place. But I can tell you from personal experience walking into that building, nothing in terms of lighting other than the computers in the data center were still running. That posed some risk to the organization. So I think this investment is needed. As far as the total amount that's proposed, we believe that number is sufficient to fix the deficiencies, replace the air handlers that are aged, do some electrical upgrades and improvements to try to deal with. Basically, essentially what happened is a ground fault occurred at that air conditioner when the compressor failed, and it went to the building main. And we want to put some redundancy in it at a breaker, not at that level where the building main is impacted. So that will require a little bit of redesign in terms of that. We have already had facilities in with our electrical contractors, and they have put a game plan together for that. So we've already started doing some of the lighter repairs that we could handle within our current budget now, but there are some larger lift things that we'll have to do once the budget's approved.
And again, so when do you anticipate the work being finished? And when might we have a more, I don't know, accurate is probably not the right language, but a more concise picture of the cost?
So we've been meeting with the vendors to kind of figure out the game plan for this. I'd expect this is probably an 18-month type project, not so much because we can't get equipment or the time that's required. It's the coordination of needing to move workloads in and out of the data center so that we're not disruptive to the city's operations. We're going to have to coordinate that in between busy periods. Normally we don't do a lot of changes during the music festivals in the fall or during the spring with Derby season. So we have to kind of work around those busy seasons for the city to make sure we're not disrupting, doing a lot of after-hours repairs. I would say 18 months is probably a safe bet in terms of the completion.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Winkler.
Just a quick question on our spending on cybersecurity. Do you feel comfortable with the level of investment that we make currently, given the threats that we and many other municipalities face? And if not, what would be an appropriate level?
Well, first, I want to express gratitude for the investment that this council has made over the last 7 years that I've been the director. There are a lot of cities that don't get that level of support and investment, and I think you've probably seen a lot of those cities in the news in terms of the impacts that they've had. We could always use more, but I'm not going to ask for more because I know the city's budget requires it to be, spread around and cover a lot of different functions. I feel like we're well positioned as a city government in terms of our position. We could always do more. We've managed to grow our team substantially over the last 7 years in terms of our security operations. We have our own 24-hour security operations center. Not many cities can claim that. So I feel like the investments have been good. I think they need to continue. I think the amount that we've requested is about what we could handle from a capacity standpoint as an agency to roll out those tools.
Great. Councilwoman Chapel.
Hi, I'm eager to get done with this because I hear that there's a new episode of Inside Man, and I cannot wait to see how the saga unfolds. Glad my Metro people get that joke. So I know that there is an effort to make the LouisvilleKY.gov website ADA compliant by March 2026. Are we on track for that?
So we've completed first round assessment of that using some tools that we went ahead with this year to determine the volume of the fix. A lot of what we're dealing with is PDF documents that are loaded to the website that have to be compliant. That's a bulk of the work that lies ahead of us, is getting those to be either archived or corrected. So we have a lot of old content on the website. What we're using right now is our Google Analytics to determine those locations that are most frequently visited, those documents that are most frequently accessed. We're going to prioritize kind of using that method going forward so we can find those documents that people are going to get those remediated. I expect that we'll make our timeline. We may have a couple of stragglers, but it'll likely be at that point very low priority documents that aren't frequently accessed according to what we're seeing through our website visits. There are other pieces of this that we are dependent on third parties for. So, for example, our 311 app is developed by Acela. So we need Acela to also improve their application to ensure that compliance. So we've got some, I think, dependencies on third parties that we have some contractual screws we can tighten on them to try to get that compliance done, but we also don't necessarily control our own destiny on those fixes.
Sure. And so while you're going through, I understand that you're prioritizing the PDFs and whatnot that you need to update. But a complaint for a while from myself has just been the inconsistency and outdatedness of our Louisville Metro website. And so in addition to that effort, are we also going through and making sure that there is consistency and the pages itself, not only the attachments, are up to date, and then working with departments? Like, I know that there's not like a website czar, but I've always felt like there needed to be.
I think you call out a good point. We have a group of content authors that exist within the departments, and we are always working to coordinate with them to make sure that we're trying to be as consistent with the rollout of the website as possible in terms of the side menu navigations and the look and the feel of the site. I think that's a struggle point for us. I think my web team would tell you that they'd love to have a content team to go out and take that out and really kind of lead that forward. But in the grand scheme of the investments that we asked for this year, we weren't able to put that one at the top of the list for things that we would ask for.
Sure. I would really love to see that prioritized next year.
Absolutely.
Because I think that that's a real connector for the people of the city. And kind of in that same vein, in a lot of departments that we see come in here, one of the largest, if not largest, increase in their budget is always software increases. And so can you kind of speak to, is there someone within Louisville Metro IT that's kind of overseeing all those departmental softwares, not only how they integrate with our system, but also are there redundancies? Are there ways that we can improve? Are there applications that can be shared under the same license?
Absolutely. So we have our technology relationship management team, and they do a good job, I think, of meeting with the agencies when they're requesting to acquire new software. All software that comes into the environment is reviewed by MTS to make sure that it's compliant with our cybersecurity standards, but we're also trying to determine if those duplications in services exist. So, example, project management software. We have Smartsheet that we are licensed for as an enterprise. Sometimes somebody will come to us with a request for a third-party project management tool. We oftentimes will do our best to try to guide them towards using that Smartsheet tool, including us helping them to configure and deploy it for their agency. Not saying we're perfect at it, but I do think we do a good job of analyzing the software that's in the environment and its utilization and determining, if somebody's not using it, can we transfer that license to a different department, different user? So I do think that we have good controls in place around that.
But there would be someone to say, wow, this contract's gone up a lot, and we need to go to the negotiating table or look for an alternative. That conversation is also happening?
So we do review kind of the terms and conditions of the contracts that they bring forward if it's a larger type tool that they're rolling out. A lot of times, the thing that we probably struggle with the most is the stuff that you can buy on a P card that is $9.95 a month or $29.95 a month subscriptions. Those are less able to be controlled in our environment just because that doesn't cross purchasing's desk necessarily as a new acquisition or a contract. It doesn't go in front of council for award for a sole source or anything like that because it's usually below that threshold. So if we were struggling with something like that, it would be in that low dollar kind of range. But our TRMs do review with the agencies when they're looking to make an acquisition. We also subscribe to a service that does reviews of contracts to determine if we're getting the best pricing from what they're seeing on the market. So we do have that capability as well within our organization, and there's 3 members of our team that can submit those to that review, and then usually within about 2 or 3 days, we can get a response back if we're getting a good price or if we need to try to renegotiate further discounts.
And that includes LMPD software?
It does.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Parrish Wright.
But I just want to have 3 and one.
Councilwoman, you're breaking up a bit, and your camera is not on. The rules, the way that the process is established, it stipulates the camera has to be on. Sorry.
No worries. It's usually on. My battery's going down, so I'm trying to plug it up. Can you hear me now?
We can. I suspect the battery is the source of the problem for both. Thank you.
It is. So I'm trying to get my 3 questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One, and I really want to admire your turnover rate is low, and I wanted to know if you have ideas on how to keep that rate low. Also, what is the timeline for the implementation of your chief AI officer, and will they report to the director of MTS or be independent?
Great questions. Thank you for the compliment on our turnover rate. We take great pride in trying to keep that as low as possible, given a competitive IT job market that we've been up against for many years. I think the success to that can largely be given to our management team that does a really good job of identifying people that need investment, job upskilling. I'm really proud of the promotions that we've done internally to the organization and making that a priority. So really proud of that. In terms of the AI officer, I do anticipate that role would report to me. As far as the timing goes, I believe, and I'll have to have OMB keep me honest, I believe these are slated to be funded for October 1st and forward of 2025. So that would be around the time that we would expect to fill that position.
Thank you. My last question, if I may, Mr. Chair. So I'm interested in knowing about the expenses. I know you talked about some of this when my other colleagues asked about this, but are we paying several $1,000s for ChatGPT expenses? And outside of personnel, what are the expenses actually for when it comes to software licensing and platforms?
Sure, that's a great question. I do have some numbers kind of compiled here to go through. So in terms of the ChatGPT Copilot investment, just to level set, every user that we license with that is between $30 and $40 a month, depending on which platform that they're on. So that adds up to $400 to $500 a year per user that we license. That is about in line with what we pay for our Office 365 subscriptions today. We pay just slightly less of that for our current productivity tools, just to give you some comparison number. We're anticipating about 250,000 of the investment to go towards those licenses this year for the workforce. Other AI investments we intend to make would be around the blight detection for codes and regulations, the computer vision for police cameras, and also for public works for pothole detection. Doing some workforce training, there'll be some investment in that space. The AI redaction tools for open records. So I can send you a breakdown of what we're proposing to spend in each of those categories if that's helpful.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Councilwoman Parker.
Hi, one quick question. I know there's some initial investment with AI, but I was curious to see what your thoughts were going forward, say fiscal year 27, if you thought utilizing it could actually create a reduction in personnel through some of the different agencies that are using it.
I'll say that we're not approaching this as looking at trying to reduce the workforce. I think that there are opportunities for jobs to kind of be reimagined, if you will, as this takes away some of the manual effort. I gave you all the example earlier about how I use ChatGPT to prepare for this hearing today. And one of the things that I would say is I could have spent 14 hours of my time reviewing all the budget hearing recordings that existed for what you guys have conducted to date. Instead, I spent about 5 minutes with ChatGPT feeding it the transcripts from those meetings and then interacted with it for about another 15 minutes asking questions and having it ask me questions that I might expect to see. So I think there'll be some efficiencies gained in terms of productivity of your existing workforce. I think as you go down the path of rolling these tools out, there's an opportunity for folks to focus their efforts in other areas that maybe aren't being paid attention to as much today. But I just want to reemphasize that we're not approaching this as a workforce reduction tool.
Was that it, Councilwoman? Okay. This is kind of a follow-up to a question that Councilman Winkler had asked earlier about the cybersecurity grant program. I too appreciate that we are in front of the curve, and you're right. We've seen what happens in other cities that aren't. But again, it is a problem bigger than metro government. I know you and I have spoken about this, one of us in private conversations as well as a very public one. But I'm looking over like what's in our budget, and I can't find this via the Transportation Via Smart grant from FY25. And then I was also wondering about, are there any other FY25 FEMA state or local cybersecurity grants? Can you just speak to where we are in the grant process? And I know we both know what we're struggling with Congress going forward, but there was grant money that we had. It's got to be baked in here somewhere. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then I get your crystal ball's no better than anybody else's, but can you give us a sense of what you think might be happening in terms of cybersecurity support from outside of just our own resources?
Sure, great question. In terms of grants that we have received or are pursuing related to cybersecurity, we did receive funding in this current fiscal year, which allowed us to fill 2 positions within our team. One of those was specifically dedicated to cyber threat intelligence. We found that there was a significant lag in communication from external partners that we were reliant on to get information. We had I'll just speak broadly, an event within the last 24 months that we detected and remediated ourselves. And 6 days after that event, I got a call from the federal government informing me of that event. If that is any indication as to the lag that we were in kind of seeing within the information flowing. So we've decided to bring that capability in-house. We've, in addition, filled a position called a red team member, and their job is to basically go around and try to poke holes in our defenses using whatever means necessary, social engineering, using scripts, trying to get past any kind of barriers that we put in place so that we can get better in those areas in a controlled fashion. So we're excited about those investments. We have applied for funding in the current calendar year, which we think will be awarded in the upcoming fiscal year, related to cybersecurity, another round of funding, which would enable us to roll out the password. It would be a assistive tool to the passwordless technologies that we're looking at is specifically what we had applied for.
Okay, great, thanks. We had asked questions about deferred maintenance work that was performed in FY '25 and what was expected in FY '26. There's $400,000 in network name resolution project that you guys are estimating. Is a portion of that to deal with the $3 million voice over internet protocols that are shifting, or how do I get my head around that?
Which project are you looking? I'm sorry.
I'm looking
Okay,
at deferred
I got you.
maintenance work performed in FY '25. Deferred maintenance is funded in FY '26.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. This is one of the proposed improvements that we have for '26. This is essentially our internal function that allows for name resolution on our network.
Okay.
We've found that the design that we have currently is not as resilient as we would like it to be. So we're looking to add those capabilities.
And did I confuse it into VoIP, or is that?
VoIP's a completely separate
There's
unit.
two completely separate
Yeah.
issues. Okay.
It is dependent, everything's dependent within our network on name
Yeah.
resolution.
I just make sure I wasn't, okay, thank
Understood.
you. I'm looking at a couple capital expenses, capital projects that have been going on for a while, and I'm curious kind of where we are. The Metro TV upgrade in council chambers, those numbers have been the same in FY '24 and FY '25. The remaining budget is $16,953,000. Have we finished all the work in council chambers for Metro TV? And if so, are you planning on using that money for some other purpose within Metro TV? 60, what did I say? Oh, 16 million would be great for council chambers. What were you thinking? How'd you get us to pass that? Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for the correction. There seems to be 16,000 sitting there still.
As far as I know, those upgrades have been completed.
Okay.
So I don't know that there's any future planned investment, but Metro TV has since separated out of MTS, so I'd need to get with them to determine if that was
Okay.
still
I didn't know if that was
necessary.
something okay, so.
They were previously a part of MTS.
Right, but
until
now they're
last year.
separated out. Okay, well, we'll reach out then. Louisville Fiber Information Technology. This is a bond that goes all the way back to 2017. It was for a match for federal funding. There's about 34,000, and that is 1,000 this time, 34,788 left.
So construction's largely completed on that project. However, we did just receive news that part of what we built with those dollars, there's a facility that we've built into that is going to be decommissioned in the near future. And so we need to likely spend the remainder of this removing the fiber from that facility as part of the decommission process. So this should be completed once that facility is shut down.
Okay. There's $1 million, and this time it is $1 million. That was for computer-aided dispatch and records management. This comes to us from '24. It wasn't, none of it was used in '25, and it doesn't show up as being used in the '26 budget. It's $1 million.
I was just conferring with Aaron about that because I had a question on it myself. We'll have to get back to you with a response on
Okay,
that one.
thank you. Angela, you appreciate this. It's always one of my favorites. There's $510 sitting in the account. Thank you. And then there's let's see, there was one more. I'm looking at, it's the computer-aided dispatch again. It's $1 million. The total amount was $11 million. You've spent $9 million some. And there's $1,713,352.98. That's not a mistake on my part. That's
And I know that those, since this report was run on March 31st, there's been additional funds spent down on that. I expect that that project will largely be expended by the end of this fiscal year.
okay. And you will use all of it for that project?
We will use all of it. Yep.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions from Councilman Winkler?
So one final question. What was the score of the ChatGPT prediction?
It's pretty accurate. I'd say it was probably about 65, 70%. It's not bad, so, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for being here.
Not bad for just some computer somewhere. Thank you for being here.
I'm usually pretty happy getting 70% right,
Oh.
so.
That generally doesn't Yeah, in the world where I live, 70% is just barely passing, 65 of them is failing, so. So my students appreciate that I expect at least a 70. Thank you for being here this afternoon. We are finished just a few minutes early. I expect that our folks from community, housing and community development are probably here. If not, they will be here soon. So we will take a 5-minute, 10-minute break, and we'll start back. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome back. I'm Councilman Kevin Kramer. I'm joined by my Vice Chair, Marcus Winkler. Also in chambers are Councilwoman Chappell, Councilman Hudson, Councilman Linenger, joining us online, Councilwoman Parker, Councilwoman Parrish Wright, Councilman Owen. There are others, I'm sure, who will be wandering in. I had said 10 minutes, and I think they might be surprised it was exactly 10 minutes. So here goes. Departments have been asked not to make opening comments, and so we will begin immediately with council members' questions concerning the Office of Housing and Community Development's proposed $22.6 million operating budget and $26.8 million capital budget. Welcome to Laura Grabowski. And I will start the questioning today and ask, if you would please, that you talk about the new $7 million federal grant that you are expecting to receive in FY26, Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing. What will this grant do for our community, and how, and I don't want to, I'm not asking a specific level of certainty, but are we really pretty comfortable about this still, or are things changing?
Thank you. Yes. Laura Grabowski, Director of the Office of Housing and Community Development. Thanks for the question. So we were successful, last year in applying for and receiving a grant from Housing and Urban Development. To your point, they call it Pro Housing. And the idea of the grant was that HUD and everyone else knows that affordable housing is we need more of it across the country. So HUD was looking for cities that wanted to figure out how to remove barriers to building affordable housing, not just necessarily through funding, but through other priorities and other strategies. So we submitted an application and were successful in being awarded $7 million. The broad categories, there are two. One would focus out of our Office of Planning on engaging a consultant to work on land development code updates that would help increase density. The other would focus on trying to build some housing faster. So we have one strategy that would be more longer term and one that would see housing faster. So the actual funding for housing would be providing gap financing to a developer to use some sort of factory-built housing on Metro-owned land. So that's where we are with that. HUD has committed, recommitted to us under the new administration that funding is still available, and so we are working on putting together our final action plan for that right now.
Great. Thank you, Councilman Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. My questioning falls right in line with the topic you were already talking about in this $7 million grant. Anytime that you can build on a fixture or in a factory, you're going to get certain efficiencies from that. Do we have, or do, well, I'm using the royal we, I guess. Do you have an idea of, say, a square footage breakdown savings of a factory-built home versus a on-site built home?
I don't off the top of my head. One thing that we have, that we've seen is that one of the biggest savers with factory-built housing is time. And that was actually one reason why we put that in the grant application. So I imagine that I imagine that if we have an economy of scale where we're producing a bunch of houses that are similar on a factory line, there will be cost savings. But at this point, what we're hearing is that factory-built houses can be built quickly. So with the affordable housing crunch and crisis that we have right now, that's one thing that we need. But I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
Would it be too much to ask to get those? Because I think that's an important part of the equation of
Sure, we can take a look.
knowing how to spend that $7 million and not buy houses at the same rate. And I don't mean by time rate, I mean by a value rate
Right,
for
yeah.
dollar per square foot of a house
Yeah.
should be much less if we're building it in a factory.
It could be, and we can definitely come back with that.
Yeah,
once
if
we
it's
have
not,
that-
I'm going to
that
call that
final
into
plan
question.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Winkler. Let the record reflect we're joined by Councilwoman Hawkins and Councilman Joseph in chambers. Now, Councilman Winkler.
Thank you. My first question is, we know that investing in permanent supportive housing is a proven intervention that should be part of our approach. Can you speak to what resources in this year's budget will be used to create permanent supportive housing specifically?
Sure, I think that this might be a good time to introduce Christy McCravey with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. As I think everybody knows, the Affordable Housing Capital Fund, the vast majority of it goes to the trust fund, and then they provide financing to projects to be built. So, is that okay, Christy?
Good afternoon, Christy McCravey, Executive Director of the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And on that, in reference to that question, over half, well, at least half of our funds have to be used for housing that is reserved for households under 50% AMI. And internally, well, even in the ordinance last year, you had a requirement that 5 million of that was to go to households serving households less than 30% AMI. Most of those units and most of the funds that we've even provided funding for this year were used for permanent supportive housing projects. We think we will see the same this year, where we will see those 30% units coming are directed to housing for permanent supportive housing units.
So I recently toured Sheehan Landing, right, which I think is a great example of a permanent supportive housing project. How many of those type of projects do we have in the hopper, and are we funded appropriately? Is there additional supply that could be brought online, but there's just not enough money in the trust fund to bring it online, or there's just not enough builders that are even interested in building? Can you kind of...
We have about 3 other developers and projects that I am aware of that have not yet sought funding, but are looking to build permanent supportive housing. They have not come to us yet, but I know there are 3, at least 3 in the hopper. Can you say at least 3?
If not more.
Okay.
At least 3 or not, if not more, but I'm aware of 3.
Okay, thank you. I want to shift gears, and Laura, kind of going back to the factory-built housing and specifically MMY, I know there's another capital allocation in the budget here. I'm sure you saw the news story last week related to MMY. Can you speak to the current status of the projects that they are developing, whether they are on target and whether there should be any cause for concern for future allocations, or just sort of speak to where we were, where we are, and where we're headed with them?
Sure, absolutely. I definitely don't think there is any cause for concern, so I'll just start with that. MMY is a company that can be considered a startup. They moved in to the market within the past year and started inhabiting a warehouse in Parkland. There was a lot to do in that warehouse that needed to be changed into an efficient place to build modular housing. So they won a competitive project to do a modular demonstration project on some land bank lots. At the same time, they were improving the production facility so that it could produce modular housing. It's very exciting to see the facility. I was there a few months ago. It's pretty amazing how fast they can build houses. They have one line. They call them boxes. So they design the house. They They put the houses, or they put the design in there, they put it on the line, and like 4 boxes essentially could equal a house. When they came in for the modular demonstration project, that came along with some funding for, essentially for gap financing. So we worked with them to pick a few lots. They were going to do a single family and some townhomes. They really wanted to, we all wanted to show the different kinds of housing that could be done with modular. So as they are getting their production facility up and running, we were in continuous communication with them. They're very good with providing progress reports on a monthly basis. And so they realized that when on the land bank side of things, when they, we thought that they could make some substantial progress within 90 days, that just wasn't realistic, and that's very common, as unfortunate as that might be with our land bank lots. So they applied for the permit through the state, and that took a little while. They have to apply for a permit per box type, per design type. So anyway, where we are now is that that single family home, the first one of the demonstration project, is under construction, and it is expected to be set on the lot by, well, we'll just call it the summer, by probably mid-July. A lot of the work that's done on these modular houses are done, they're factory built, they're done in a factory. And MMY went through some, I don't know, pretty standard growing pains. They had some thefts, they had some, they hired some people that didn't work out. They've course corrected every time, and that's what has given us confidence that that they can produce. They are working with Family Scholar House. That's a very trusted partner of the city's. They're building some units in the medical center area, and also for IB Tech across the river, along with this modular demonstration project. So we'll see a house put on the site in the summer. We are watching their cost and their sales prices. And so, once they've got that design and once they have that permitted, future house creation or house development can be much faster. So that is the main reason that we wanted to propose additional funding for this year. We'd love to see, one of these modular houses in every council district, but at least scattered around the county, because they're really pretty amazing when you see the process, and then when you actually walk through them, you really can't tell the difference between it and a stick-built house.
And so the capital money that's in the budget is for how many additional units?
I think that will depend on the location, the acquisition cost, but at least, I would say 5 to 7.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hawkins.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Just a couple questions. How much money has MMY gotten received from Metro?
I think it is 2.2 million. They were in the project that I was just talking about, the modular demonstration, that was a $500,000. And then there was 1.7 million for the production facility.
Okay, who monitors their progress on production?
We do, our team does.
Okay, so how many houses or module homes have they built, or did we look into before we decided to give them those funds?
Do you mean the funds for the production facility?
Yeah, the funds for to build these module homes, because I'm gonna echo off my colleague. I know he stated that from the news article that came out, you know, it stated that nothing has been done. So, and I know when you're a developer, you know, and when you're a pretty established developer, you know that there's gonna be kinks in the road. So it's surprising that, you know, they got locked in a 90-day contract and couldn't fulfill that contract. You know, if they were a developer from day one, they would have already known that. So I'm asking, did we check to see if they had built any other modular homes prior to coming here?
I was not part of the decision when they came here. I don't know that.
Okay.
You all know this, but
Okay.
I've been here in this role since August. But I will say that that is not true to say that, or to read that nothing has been done. That facility is amazing. It is really up and running.
Excuse me, I'm not talking about the facility,
Uh-huh.
because they just purchased the facility.
Uh-huh.
They actually just bought it, right? That's what they said. That's what they said, they just bought it. So I thought that before we gave money out, and correct me because I'm still new and I'm still learning, that they're supposed to own the land before we give them any money. So we gave them money and they didn't own the land yet.
They had a lease, and I don't know that that's, I don't know that owning the land has been necessarily a part. I'm trying to think of other projects that we've done in the past, but we knew that they had a lease on that land and that they were interested in buying it at some point, but that they didn't wait until they purchased that property to start updating the production facility. I believe I was there, it was cold, so maybe like December, January, and they were operating, they had employees, they had one line up, and they have been.
They in my district, I know everything about them.
Okay, all right, well, there you
Thank
go.
you.
So they've been producing they've been producing boxes. We're anxiously awaiting the single family in the summer.
Councilman Joseph.
Yeah, my questions are about the small developer program. What has been the success rate of this new program?
The small developer program, I think, has been very successful. I will say it was a pilot program. It took us a while to get it off the ground. So we opened up the application portal in late December. Within the first few days, we received more applications than we had funds to give out, or to lend out, excuse me. So those developers have received conditional commitments, and now they are receiving, they're executing agreements. We've gotten 2, I think, executed. But so the $1.9 million that we have allocated, that you all have allocated for those funds, are conditionally committed. And we'll have, I'm trying to think of how many units that we will have for that. 30 units, thank you. Somebody's telling in my ear. And they have a pretty short term in order to rehab those units. They're vacant units that are going to be rehabbed and rented out.
So is it 30 that have been actually approved?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. How long did it take from the first application to getting contracts executed?
Definitely longer than it should. It's probably been maybe four months, and we've learned a lot along the way. So our intention, I know that you all saw in the recommendations that we're asking for additional funding this year to continue that program. But our plan is to, the discussions have already started about how to improve it and to make it a bit more efficient and effective, and really also target the small developers that we desperately need to build capacity.
Okay. 2 more questions, if I can, about that. How much of the funds for this program have actually been drawn down?
None. We've just gotten contracts executed, so I believe we have an invoice in for the first one, which would probably be 75,000. And then we executed the second agreement today. The agreements have to be executed before those funds can be drawn. So now, once the agreements are executed, they can start submitting invoices. So within the next 30 days, you'll see funds drawn.
Okay. And then the last thing I have is, what is the criteria for the small developer program?
That's one of the things that we are taking a look at and definitely making plans to change. We defined a small developer as a developer that owned 50 units or less. And we took that looking at some other cities and other programs, but we realized that that is way too high. So that's one eligibility. The other is that they own the unit and that it's vacant and that they're going to rent it. And they're going to rent it at an affordable rate. So we are, like I said, we're looking at making some changes to those eligibility criteria.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Owen.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to ask a question. We've been talking about vacant and abandoned houses since I've been on council and trying to move through that process more quickly and efficiently. Can you talk about that, where we are with that? And I get the question from small and mid-sized developers all the time, can we make more of those properties available and make more of those properties that are kind of contiguous and adjacent available so we can get some economies of scale? Can you kind of talk about that and let me?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, you're right. We've been working on vacant and abandoned properties for a very long time. Our city has has a variety of tools that we use for resolving vacant and abandoned properties. And we've been pretty successful over the years at the state level and, of course, with Metro Council support of making some changes that make certain processes faster. But at the end, we are still dealing with a property that someone owns or some entity owns, and we can't just take it. So we use city-initiated foreclosure using the code enforcement liens and sometimes delinquent taxes. That process does take a while. We use the county attorney's office and a private attorney to work through that. We have our land bank, and that is a partnership between the city, the state, and the school board, the main taxing entities that can accept property and clear the title, which is very important when you're trying to acquire property and make sure that the property is redeveloped. We do demolish properties when we absolutely have to. Lost my train of thought on the vacant properties. So the land bank has recently undergone a bunch of changes, and actually the land bank board heard a proposal for some new programs that I think will help some of those small and medium developers that you're talking about. We have had a policy, or the land bank has had a policy for a long time of selling one parcel at a time, unless there's something there's some very special situation. And so we've heard from a lot of developers, smaller, medium, big developers, and they are interested in purchasing more than one property at a time. So we've proposed a few ways that developers can purchase 2 to 4 properties at a time and 5 plus properties at a time. And so those changes will be voted on later in June. They were pretty well received. They're out actually for public comment right now. I think the public comment period ended maybe Friday. But developers will be able to purchase multiple lots. Now, whether we own them contiguously, that's an entire other story. But I know we have been working over the past, 8 to 10 years on targeting areas, targeting blocks, so that, to your point, when the land bank already owns one parcel and the next one is available or is eligible for foreclosure, we will try to go after that. So because we know that makes the most sense for developers and frankly for the land bank as well.
And Chair, if I can follow up, I mean, as it relates to the budget, I mean, not specifically Office of Housing and Community Development, but codes and regs, we spend an awful lot of money on maintenance on these properties. So I feel like I hope that we can start moving these through more quickly. And then it seems like rather than selling, if we're dealing with a nonprofit developer who's going to commit to affordable housing, just to get those properties off the books and move them through and get them back on the property tax roll makes some sense. So I'm happy that we're making progress. Is there anything we can do with the $7 million grant you spoke about earlier where we can focus on what other cities are doing related to vacant and abandoned houses and land banking and trying to move that process more quickly? Is there anything we can use that $7 million on to help move that process along?
I think that some of the land development code updates can actually help with that. I will say that the proposal for the building of new units using the factory-built housing is slated for metro-owned property and probably primarily in the south and/or east. So it might not be a great fit for that pro-housing grant money, but to your point, I think we've made a ton of progress on vacant and abandoned properties, the process. I think, where we are trying to focus our efforts now is on the redevelopment side. So about, small developers. I mean, we can churn vacant properties through the foreclosure and through conservatorship and through programs all day long, but if we don't have somebody on the end that has funding and the will to, redevelop it and sell it or rent it, that's not, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to turn into a city-maintained lot rather than an abandoned lot. So I think that's where, having funding for smaller developers, having funding for larger developers, having, funding for neighbors, helping to really focus on that last piece of what are we going to do with the abandoned property once we get it out of that abandoned state. That's important.
Thank you, Chair.
You bet. Councilwoman Brewery had been with us in the previous hearing and had stepped out and had rejoined us, has been with us for a bit. We've just been joined by Councilwoman Purvis. Councilwoman Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Did you call on me?
I did. Are you showed up in the queue? I'm assuming you still wanted in?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm just making sure. I heard
Great.
right.
You are on.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the questions. And I know it's hard to predict numbers, especially with grants. But when I'm thinking about the $7 million under that grant from HUD, how can you translate to how many units you think that may be that may come from that?
I think that I can translate the portion of it that we have set aside for development. It's much harder on the land development code updates because that could translate into a lot more units, but that's difficult. That's difficult to do. On the 3 million, we actually do have a request out for developers who are interested in developing on some parcels that Metro owns on North English Station Road. And if the responder is interested in using factory-built housing, we could pair the land with that, with some of those funds. And I know that particular land could accept up to 40 units. That's probably on the high side for those parcels, but that's about what we're looking at for. And again, don't think of 7 million as getting 30 units. Think of it as probably half or a little bit less than half of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know that's a hard question to answer. I'm also not seeing much by way of the anti-displacement ordinance in the matrix for implementing it. Is that something that would be under your budget and department, or just trying to see where that is in this process?
Sure. As the ordinance was passed, I think that we share that responsibility with Human Relations Commission So yes, there is an anti-displacement commission that we've been reviewing applications for. I believe that needed to have 9 members, and so we've been working with the mayor's office and Althea Jackson on those applications, and so those are pretty close to being ready to come over to the council for review and approval. The actual assessment has been, we worked with Boston University. I know the council and the committee saw one version of the tool late last year. So we really expect to start looking at the projects that would come up for funding under this upcoming fiscal year, because we're still trying to make it work, and we're still trying to make it work easily. Boston University was very helpful to us, but there are still some kinks to work out. So I believe with the new fiscal year, you'll see more information about that.
I appreciate that, and if you can update us on that as you can. So my last question is, I see there's 200,000, I think, for the Ali Center, and then there's 1.8 million for the Healing Place. And knowing that these entities are important and they continue to grow, can you give me an idea of what that is for, that funding is for both of those organizations?
That's a good question. Do you have information on that? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
I don't
okay.
know it right off the
I
top
know
of my head,
that
but we can get it to you.
the Healing Place came out of the opioid settlement funding, and the Ali Center is, I believe, a continuation of funding that they had received in the past for some renovations, some interior renovations. Other than that, I'm going to have to get back with you on the details.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Linenger.
Thank you, Chair. Does Housing and Community Development have sufficient staff to deal with the 220 million plus spending that's available for the upcoming year? I'm especially concerned with the money that has a shorter shelf life, especially in light of the federal government and the end of the ARP money that needs to be spent.
Yeah, that's a good question. We're always concerned about that, or we have been, at least recently, with the federal budget. I would say that I think we do have sufficient staff. We've switched around over the past few years our service delivery. We used to have a decent amount of staff that was focused on direct client services, and we've really moved and will continue to move toward supporting organizations that already do that work, whether that is internal to Metro, like Office of Social Services, or external, like our nonprofit partners like Habitat and New Directions. Those two specifically have helped us immensely in our homeowner repair program. So we really have reduced staff over the past few years. And I think that the team that we have now, we've got really good experience. We've got the comp study really helped with the pay rates, and I think really now what we're looking for is to try to continue our partnerships with other nonprofit organizations and increase those.
Okay, and that leads me to my next question. You had a turnover rate that was that doubled. And was outside of Metro's average. Can you explain that, and what are the plans to address that?
Yeah, sure. It really is explained by what I was just saying. We eliminated a few positions last year that had to do with intake for homeowner repair because we were not taking applications for homeowner repair, so those positions were not needed. We also are coming off of having a lot of eviction prevention money that was, to your point, related to COVID, and so as those were being vacated, we were not filling those. So I know it looked like we have a really high turnover rate, and I didn't love to see that, considering we also had a leadership change, and so I don't feel like it's representative of that. I think it has more to do with the switch that we're getting out of the direct service business.
Okay, so, I guess I do have concerns about the, specifically home repair and, how we're serving the community, because we're offloading that out of metro government. But then when, I know for a fact this winter, there were freezes in home repair programs from external agencies. So it's sort of like we tell our constituents, we've got community partners that are dealing with that. And then when they call the community partners, they say, boy, you're gonna need to talk to your councilman about that because I can't do anything for you.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead,
my
sorry.
final question is, and if I need to, I'll get back in the queue. We have fewer units of public housing slated for the redevelopment at Dosker Manor. When Parkway Place is redeveloped, we are definitely going to have fewer units. It's the last barrack style left in the city. Does this budget have any funding for the expansion of true public housing to the city to try to restore it to previous levels? I mean, because we're way under our cap limit, like.
I would definitely defer questions related to public housing units to Elizabeth Sturgeon at LMHA. I will say that in OHCD's budget this year, what we are trying to do is to support the Housing Authority in the projects that they have going on right now. We have limited ways with our federal funding that we can do that, but similar to what we had done with Beecher and Liberty Green and Shepherd Square, we do have fundings that we've proposed to use for demolition, infrastructure, that sort of thing. But I would have to defer the unit discussion specifically over to Elizabeth. She'll know way more than I would about that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is a point of clarity from a question that Councilman Winkler had asked. His question was this is back to the pro-housing grant. He asked, out of that $7 million, how many housing units you anticipated would result from that? Maybe I misunderstood the question or misheard the answer. You said 5 to 7?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I said approximately 40. And remember that it's not, the entire 7 million won't be used for the actual development of housing. It will be closer to 3. And so we're looking at somewhere around 40 units, but that's a very early estimate.
Okay. And my second question, and I'll leave it to the discretion of the chair to determine whether or not this is a budget question. You feel free to throw the red flag. In other jurisdictions where manufactured housing has been used, there's sometimes been a conflict on who does the building inspections. The manufactured housing company has its own inspectors at the factory that do inspections. And then the cities have their codes and regs people that do inspections at the city. Who's going to do it for Louisville is my question.
I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that it depends on the type of construction. Modular is different
I
than
see a lot of heads
manufactured.
nodding
Sorry.
behind you.
Oh, well,
Maybe someone.
Feel free to come up and answer the question then if somebody's got the answer.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry I
Okay.
interrupted you.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So it depends on whether it's modular or manufactured. One of them, the state handles that, and that's part of what happened on the MMY side. Back to Councilman Owen's question, Winkler's question, sorry. The state had to give the permit for that, but the city gives the foundation permit just like it would for anything else. So it's a bit of a mix.
So do we have a clear understanding for how we are going to do it? We, Metro Louisville, are going to do it?
Oh, we, the city codes and regs, how we are going to permit and inspect?
Yeah, that's my question.
Is that the question?
How are
Yeah.
we going to do it?
I assume it will not be me. You will not want me to be inspecting that, but it will be under codes and regs and construction review. And I know that they've been working very hard to figure this out, and they've been pretty quick about it, so they're getting ready.
Okay, so Louisville Metro Codes and Regs will be doing the permitting and the inspecting for manufactured housing.
They
We-
do
and
it
we-
for, they will do it for, oh my gosh, I'm just answering modular, I'm trying to think. The state handles the modular.
And if I'm using the
bill.
wrong words, tell me.
No, it's okay.
I'm
It's, well,
interchanging manufactured
I
and
get
modular.
confused too.
For the MMY housing, let's
Yeah,
get clarity here. For the
this-
MMY housing, who's going to do the inspecting?
Oh, okay, I was wrong on that. Okay. So I guess for modular, the city is doing the inspections. They
Okay,
do
so
the
we
inspection
will-
of the factory, they do the inspection of the on-site.
So we would not accept an inspection certificate from the company, from the developer?
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that
Okay.
we do that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Councilwoman Chapel.
Hello. Since we're on MMY, I'll focus my first set of questions on that, and then I'll get back in the queue. Can you please clarify, earlier you said pretty confident and quickly that MMY to date has gotten $2.2 million, 1.7 of that for their facility build-out and $500,000 for their pilot project. However, in fiscal year 25, Project 115 has $1.2 million for production facility development. And so I'm just trying to figure out, is it 1.2, 1.7, or 2.2, and where did that, why don't we have those correct numbers in front of us?
There were three allocations.
3 different capital projects last year for this?
There were 3 line items. There was I'd have to look at the budget to find them, but there was a $500,000 allocation for the production facility. Then there was a 1.2, that's the one that you see. And then there was 500,000 that was part of a homeownership incentive capital project.
And so that $500,000 was going to build units in districts 1 and 5 as a part of the pilot project?
The parcels that we've identified are in 4 and 5. I think they're on 18th Street, and then there's one on 42nd.
And how many units per site?
There is one going onto the single-family site on 42nd, and there are townhomes, I believe there are 3 townhomes going on the 18th Street site.
So I've been on every single page of their very minimal website, and there's little to no real photography on MMY's website, and everything's mostly computer-generated images. Looks like a great front for a business, but here nor there. As we're all aware, Louisville Metro's 26 Metro Council districts vary quite differently. I know this modular housing, you can have 1 unit, you can have 600 units. And so as you're looking to do one of each of these in each district, is that 1 house with 1 unit for 1 single family in each district, or will each district vary? And assuming that we've already given $500,000 for this project to happen in 2 different sites already, are we to assume that it's $250,000 per site?
No, that was a lot of questions, but no. The 500,000 for the modular was a loan, and it was originally for 5 parcels. What we wanted to do was to help showcase what modular could do. It can do a single family, it can do an accessory dwelling unit, it can do a townhouse, it can do a 4-plex. So the idea was, let's get the single family built first, and then let's see what else can be built. So to answer your question about the council districts, it could vary. I mean, it depends on the area, the neighborhood, the lot, the parcel. You know, there's just a lot of variances. But I guess the vision or the idea is to show that modular can blend in with all different kinds of neighborhoods.
Sure. I don't know if it's Louisville's responsibility to have proof of concept for a business, but here we are. Is there, when we're talking about modular housing and MMY, there has to be a vision. We want to create X amount of units in 26 council districts. This is how much it's going to cost, because I'm wondering how much money do we have to keep funneling into this project that we haven't seen anything from yet?
Well, at this point, what we're proposing or what we're asking is for 1 million to continue the pilot project that we started, knowing that the first house has been designed, it is on the line, it's being constructed, and within a month or 6 weeks, it will be set and ready to go. It is difficult with modular because you don't see it's not stick built, you don't see the framing, and you don't see the all of that. You go to the factory and you can see it being built, you see the designs, so that we're not asking for funding for 24 council districts or for 24 houses in this budget. That wouldn't be realistic, but we do think that $1 million for 5 to 7 modular houses over the next year is probably pretty realistic.
So there is no grand vision, and we're just going to continue giving money to this, hoping that it will materialize.
What do you mean by grand vision?
Well, again, is there a goal for units? 26 units? Are we trying to build 50 units? Are we trying, when we've given every last penny to MMY to build units in each 26 district, how many units are we expecting to have built? Because if we're going to do
I
a
see what
million
you're
here, a
saying.
million here, a million
Yeah, I
here,
see
and
what
get
you're
26 units, I'd rather us invest that money in a different way.
Got it. I understand your question. Yeah. I was asking about the grand vision because I think from MMY's perspective, I don't speak for them, but I think they do have a grand vision. What we, the city, would like
Have they shared that with anyone?
Well, they would like to, I think they would like to be part of the affordable housing solution in the city. And that is one reason why we've partnered with them, or why we have provided them some subsidy. The good thing about modular is that once the design is done, they can build.
We've heard this, we've heard that. We get that,
Okay.
we get that part. We
Right.
understand what modular housing is. I'm not going to beat up on this anymore. I hope that my colleagues have heard enough to feel like this is ridiculous to continue pumping money into this until we've seen the products or the fruits of the first investment come through, or even a plan. Last question, and then I'll get back in the queue, and this is a yes or a no. Is there any money in this budget for the redevelopment of the former Iroquois Homes site?
No.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Purvis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Ms. Grabowski. I have a few questions that I want to ask you. I'd like to know how much inventory do you have for both land bank properties and Metro-owned housing?
The land bank has around 800 parcels. Most of that is lots. Metro, that's a harder question because Metro government itself owns like 1,700 parcels, but most of them are like the one we're sitting in today. So it's harder to, I don't have a number off the top of my head of how many parcels Metro owns that could be redeveloped or that are vacant.
Is it any way possible to get that information?
Sure.
Okay. And why is it that the Community Development Department, why is it that they have not disposed of more properties to developers?
Well, some of it goes to something that we discussed a little bit earlier, which is that the land bank historically has sold one parcel at a time. And we've heard over the years that developers, small, medium, and large developers are interested in purchasing more than one parcel at a time. So we have proposed some programs to the land bank. They've been out for public comment, and we're hoping to have them approved at the end of June that will allow applicants to apply for 2 to 4 parcel, or 2 to 4 parcels at a time, and then even 5 and up parcels at a time. And so we're hoping that with that, with those programs, we can really start to see more dispositions, more successful dispositions of land bank properties.
So have you identified your process having, more or less of a barrier from being able to make these properties available to these developers?
Yeah, frankly, in the past, it's been that the land bank has been pretty risk averse. These are properties, as you know, that have been abandoned and vacant for decades sometimes. And so the land bank board has, I think we've been a bit risk averse to say, here, you take it, because sometimes we would provide, we would dispose of properties to entities and, they wouldn't be able to, or they wouldn't do anything with it, and we'd have to try to get them back. That doesn't happen a lot, but, once you go through that a couple of times, it's we'd really would increase our amount of due diligence that we would do before giving them away. So that is, that's kind of the history there, but we would really like to be able to work more with developers who want to purchase multiple parcels.
So does your RFP have a time frame listed for developing?
Yes, I think I understand your question to be, if you're a developer and you want to purchase properties from the land bank, is there a timeline?
For them to develop those
Yes,
properties?
yeah, right, yes. So the proposal right now is 12 months.
Okay, and you do know that's not happening, right?
Yes, we have heard a lot of comments about that. I will say that in the past, what we've done is we've asked developers to tell us how long they will take to either rehab a property or build a property. And then, and it's, it's normally 12, 18, 24 months, and then we will hold them to that. What we were trying to do is to say, if we're gonna start selling multiple properties at the same time, we would like to see, if you're saying, well, I can develop 10 properties, well, let's see it, let's see it quickly. So we have received a decent amount of comment that is too short of a time frame. So I would look to see some revisions on that.
Can you honestly tell me if you think some developers have taken advantage of the market increase in property value by waiting, by not doing, developing the property when they're supposed to, holding on to the property until the value increased? Do you think some of them have done these things?
I would hope not. That is, that's not the point of the land bank, and frankly, there are a lot of other vacant properties out there that people could buy if they want to be speculative and purchase properties. But I'm not going to say that has never happened.
And my last question, I think maybe Ms. McCravey may be able to answer. I wanted to know if you have identified your developers for your affordable housing projects going forward.
Thank you for the question. Christy McCravey, Executive Director of the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We do not pre-identify developers for our projects. What we do is after the June allocation is made, we revise our guidelines based on any specific information that has been put into the ordinance. We then have orientation to open the window, which is, we have a competitive round of applications. So we will have orientation. The goal is to have that orientation sometime in September, open the window by October 10th, that's our normal date, and then start beginning to accept applications so that we can at least have our first set of approvals by the end of the year.
And do you have a time frame for development?
We do. If they are single-family projects, they range from 18 months to 3 years, depending upon the number of homes. If it is a larger multifamily project, they have 3 years. That is it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Grabowski.
Thank you. Councilman Hawkins.
Thank you. I'm gonna jump back on this MMY real quick again. Just one question about that. Has anyone from housing went to visit there, and not just at the grand opening, and not just before the breaking news came out? Has anyone went down there before they put those module homes down there? Because I'm just asking, like, to see how many employees they had, if they was in the guidelines of that we sent over that they were supposed to stay in. So did you all go down there and visit?
Yes. Yeah,
How often have you done that?
I would say, I don't know, I was down there, I know Michelle, like probably every 6 weeks.
You said about 6 weeks ago?
No, about every 6 weeks. I think somebody's been down there to the actual
you've seen
production
production each week that you went?
Yeah, probably starting in, I don't know, October, yes.
Okay. How many residents will benefit from housing programs under this budget?
That's a good question. Let's see. Let's see here. So going off of what we've done before, I don't know, we've seen okay, let me look, sorry, I'm rambling. Homeowner repair looks like probably 200 to 300. The affordable housing units that OHCD does, we're hoping to see a decent amount completed.
I just need to know the number of residents that, that would benefit from off of this budget.
Right, I know. I can add it up and come back, but otherwise I need to add it up while I'm thinking. So I would say somewhere around, 2,000, and we'll add trust fund in there too.
Okay.
Can you get us a firm number on that in the future? Not today, but at some point.
Sure.
Thank you.
What metrics are used to measure the success of housing initiatives?
We have the My Louisville Home Plan. We have a dashboard that counts the different, the progress of the different strategies and the initiatives. So a lot of it is, people served or people housed. We do have, we have initiatives or strategies around vacant properties. So, how long a property sits in the land bank from acquisition to disposition, how many foreclosures and demolitions are done in our targeted areas. We have some performance indicators around length of time for home repair, number of units produced versus preserved. I can definitely.
Okay, you can circle back around later.
Send these to you.
Yeah, you can send it to me. My last question, and then I'll jump back in the queue, is how does the department ensure resources are being used effectively and efficiently?
So a lot of our resources come from the federal budget, the federal government, and they come with a lot of strings attached. And that, I think externally can be seen as negative because it can be seen as a lot of red tape. But those compliance requirements also, they are set in there to help programs run efficiently and effectively. So they make sure that the city is spending money in the way that it should, and spending money on eligible projects and spending money fast enough. We take a look at our processes quite a bit. We've made quite a few improvements. We've made a lot of improvements to different processes that we've had over the years, especially related to vacant properties.
And how does this budget support the city's long-term goals for housing?
So the city really is focused on, I mean, we are focused on building units. We have a crisis of affordable housing units. So this budget will create new units while preserving the units that are out there. That's how it will work toward the city's long-term housing goal.
Thank you, Councilwoman. It's right at 5 o'clock. This hearing is scheduled to end at 5. There are 3 folks in the queue. All of them have asked questions before, but I'm inclined to, if Ms. Grabowski, you don't mind hanging around for an extra 10 minutes, I'm inclined to give everybody a chance to answer these last few questions. I would ask my colleagues, please. The 3 that are in the queue, plus the 1 question I'm going to ask now, needs to be the rest of the hearing for today. I'm looking back over a number of general obligation notes and bonds. I'm looking only at the ones that predate 2020. If you add those 6 together, it comes out to be over $1 million. Are those, and those are bonds that we hold. It's our borrowed money. It's ours. So at what point can we go out and sweep those and move them to other projects?
Yes, please. I also don't know what they're for.
We can, OMB will work with the department to take a look at those and see if there's anything that can be swept there.
Great, thank you. And again, I'm talking, all of these are borrowed money, so there's lots of federal money out there still. We could ask lots and lots of questions about those. I was focused only on general obligation bonds and notes that predate 2020. If we want to include 2021 through 2025, that gives us a much bigger number.
Okay.
Thank
yes.
you. Again, the last 3 folks in the queue, I'd ask, keep in mind, we're at 5 o'clock. So Councilman Joseph.
One question. Of all the millions of dollars affordable trust funds have received, what percentage has gone towards home ownership?
Christy McCravey, Executive Director of the Trust Fund. I would say the percentage, the number I can give you right off the top is probably about 250 units out of the almost 5,600 units. I'd have to do the math, but that's
So
about
you
the
said
number.
250 out of 5,600?
Yes.
Okay. So it's about 4%. Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Linenger.
Thank you. So my next question is about the Park Hill Community Center, which is kind of, bounced around in terms of responsibility. And I know the previous occupant of my office had tried to secure some funding for really critical needed renovations there that the Housing Authority just, they don't have the funds, especially when they need to concentrate on housing directly. And I know that, part of your office's budget for this year includes the Baxter Community Center. Is there any chance of us being able to get that money spent through your office to do these really critical, kids are walking through sewage over there.
Yeah, I haven't seen that proposal, but that is the type of project that we would be interested in at least reviewing.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. I'd love to talk to you about that because I really wanted it to be in this budget. It's a really critical need. And then, one more thing on the MMY thing. If it's already $1 million to this project is committed and submitted to HUD, why is that so late in the process to us?
Let me see if I understand your question. Oh, I think I understand the question. Okay, the pro-housing grant that we submitted to HUD and received an award, that is completely separate from the MMY funding. So that funding that is slated to be used for factory-built housing on Metro-owned land is not necessarily going to MMY. We would put out in fact, we've called for developers to develop on Metro-owned land, so any factory-built owner could submit on that. Does that make sense?
I understand your answer. Thank you.
Okay, you do, all right.
Councilwoman Chapel, you have the last series of questions.
Sure. You had said that in fiscal year you wanted to do 180 household repairs, and I was wondering, have you met that goal?
Yes.
And how many?
Oh, wait a minute, almost. Okay, so right now, we're at 150 in homeowner repair.
And so will there be money left over from that, from last year to
Oh.
move forward?
Yes, absolutely.
And what were the results of the home repair needs assessment that was done in fiscal year '25?
So our consultant is coming in this week, and actually, she will be presenting at the Community Affairs Committee on those recommendations. But I can tell you that the short sort of takeaways are that there is much more need for home repair than we have funding for, that the city should not be the only or the main funder of homeowner repair, that we need our city needs a larger ecosystem of funders and partners, and 3, that Metro government needs to reduce or limit or use more partners and kind of get out of the direct service game. Those are the high-level takeaways, but I'm happy to share the needs assessment when it comes in. Christie.
Oh, hi.
Ms. Grabowski, you're throwing the floor to Ms. McCravy?
Apparently.
Only to make a correction, Councilman, that number is 453 single-family units through the end of fiscal year '25.
Your eviction prevention program ends at the end of June 2025, and it will not continue. Do we know the impact of discontinuing this program will have on our communities? Is there any money in the budget for eviction prevention? And do we know about how much annually we would need to truly make an impact on offlining people from going into homelessness?
I think there are answers to those questions. Our office, Housing and Community Development, we got into the eviction prevention program when COVID came and the city had so much money to get out the door. But we are deferring any future eviction prevention programs over to the Office of Social Services. That's what they do. They deal with direct client services. So I know there is an impact of that funding going away. Of course, it was hugely successful. But as far as numbers and the numbers that we would need, that's definitely a question for social services.
Sure. I think $177 million, if I recall, has gone since 2020 to eviction prevention. This year, we have less than $2 million going to the Association of Community Ministries to administer that, but 17 out of the 13 use that for administrative costs alone and not for direct assistance. And so I just want to point out that the amount that we are actually giving for eviction prevention is going to be drastically lower, and that's going to have a monumental impact on the amount of people that we see in our streets and on our shelters. And I think that we need to be very, very, very aware of that. Last question. Last year in project number 8, we had given $750,000 to, I believe it was, I'd have to look, but it's complimentary funds for Russell. And then this year we also have another $750,000. And I was just wondering how much of our matching commitment is left? And is that going to be just an ongoing annual $750,000? And what projects do we have to show from that from last year's investment?
I know. I'm getting to it. Hold on. I'm looking. So that fund initially was for the Russell neighborhood and for the redo of Beecher Terrace and the neighborhood improvements that went along with it. It, in the past few years, has been expanded outside of Russell. So it is funded. I'm trying to remember what, I was looking for the list of what we actually funded in this current year. It's taking me a minute. I know in the past we funded the Beauregard College of Music. It's on Muhammad Ali in Russell. It's a historic building that had gone into disrepair. We received a grant from the National Park Service, and so we used some of that funding to match it, and we're getting ready to, it's almost finished, we're getting ready to announce an operator for that particular project. So that's the type of projects that we use with that. But in order to come up with the actual list of projects, I think I'm going to have to get back with you on that. I'm looking.
But in
Yes.
fiscal year '27, are we to expect another $750,000? Is this in perpetuity?
I don't think I'll answer about in perpetuity, but yes, it has been extremely helpful for a variety of redevelopment projects over this year, and I know in the past years.
Sure. Accountability and transparency is important, so I look forward to looking at that project list.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, thank you for being so mindful and focused. I had suggested that we might extend an extra 10 minutes. I do have one council member who has requested an opportunity. So, Councilwoman, we are still within that extra 10 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Grabowski, oftentimes we get complaints in regards to the contractors that you all are using. So I wanted to know, what steps are you taking to confirm that these contractors are who they say they are, that they're licensed, bonded, reference checks? Because we get a lot of complaints about incomplete work, inadequate work, and then we need to know what to do when we get these complaints.
Absolutely. We hate hearing that, because we know that when we have a homeowner that's in desperate need of repairs, we certainly don't want to add to their stress level. I will say that, the vast majority of home repair clients report that they have no trouble and that they're very satisfied with the contractors. But you're right, we sometimes do receive complaints, and sometimes they, of course, go to our council offices. So we do have a pretty stringent vetting process for the home repair contractors. I will say that we generally need more contractors, and so, the list of contractors that we have that are willing to work on our program is smaller than it should be. What you should do is what you normally do now, which is contact our office. We have inspectors that have gone out to check the contractor's work. Sometimes we send a supervisor out to check if that's not looking great. But I will say, big picture, that is one of the reasons that we, OHCV, will be and are lowering our, or I guess, increasing our partnerships so that homeowners can get repairs done by our partners, and those partners have their own ways of managing their contractors, and then we, the city, are overseeing the organization's programs.
Who signs off on the completion of the work? Did you just say that? Because I may not have heard you.
Sorry, yes. We do have, at this point, we have a team of rehab inspectors, and so the rehab inspector is signing off on the contractor's work. They're taking after pictures, they're reviewing the scope or the actual work against the scope. And like I said, sometimes a supervisor will get called in to double check as well.
Thank you. And I appreciate your being willing to hang around for an extra 10 minutes. This brings us to the end of today's budget hearing. I will see you guys back here again on Thursday at 3. Take care. After budget.